All right, guys. Hi, it's Brad in the studio with MJ. I am here with another really special guest, a really good friend. I'm almost embarrassed to say how long I've known this guy, but actually, I'm proud of how long I've known him. Mr. Matt Forger, a dear, sweet guy, someone that goes way back in Michael's studio life and personal life. So Matt, thank you. Thank you for doing this, for jumping in and kind of celebrating this week. So hello.
Well, hello, Brad. It's so good to be in touch with you here as we are on opposite corners of the continental United States.
And it's a drag because normally most years I'm in LA this week. And most of the time, if I can yank you away from your busy schedule, you come out and hang out with us in the studio for a bit. But this is not the year for that, unfortunately. But thanks for jumping in with us.
No, it's not the year for that. It's unfortunate that we have to all weather what's happening with the pandemic, but we all have to deal with it, and we all have to, keep our lives together and move forward too. That's the important part.
Exactly. You're good. Your family's good.
Everybody's doing well.
Fantastic.
I don't think anybody is really doing extremely well because everyone is just under a crazy amount and type of stress that no one has experienced before. So,
it's
as long as everyone can, what gets me through is having a sense of humor in knowing that things will improve.
Fantastic. So I'm being normal. Since you and I are friends, I veer off the track and off the script all the time. But you just said something that I watched you and I learned a lot from you. And you were so cool under pressure. And you always had, Bruce and Quincy and Rod and the whole crew and just this enormous amount of pressure that eventually I had to kind of ease into. But yeah, you did have a great sense of humor. I like to think I learned a little bit of that from you and just kind of grace under pressure.
Well, the job that, of course, that we had and all those that worked with us, who were ever part of the team effort, it was always the fact that there was this great collaborative energy.
Yeah.
And gosh, when you get a bunch of really talented, creative people together, and when they're actually nice people you enjoy actually spending time with, if that's what you call work, which we have been able to do. We have been able to call what we do, oh yes, my job is I go to the studio and I hang out with my buddies and we all make music. Gosh, it's a blessing and it's a true privilege and honor, not just to have a career and work in a recording studio making music, but also to work with the great individuals that we have both worked with. Michael Quincy, and that's the top of the mountain, and all of those others that we've encountered.
Yep.
A lot of people.
All right. Well, we are going to dive into this.
Okay.
So even though I know it, go ahead and tell how and when you first met Michael and how your MJ journey began.
My MJ journey began when one day it was either Quincy or Bruce came in and they said something to the effect of, oh yeah, and one of the albums we're going to be recording is going to be Michael's next album. And I don't know what album it was that we were working on at the time. It probably was one of the first ones. So it might have been Ernie Watts or Lena Horne. And they kind of gave me the lay of the landscape. And they said, well, we've got some interesting albums coming up. And one of them is going to be Michael's next album. And I had never met him at that point. But I thought it would be fascinating to see what that world holds in terms of working with someone of his ability and talent. So I was very curious to start the experience. The actual first time I met Michael was the actual day that we had the tracking session for The Girl Is Mine.
Wow.
So an amazing day because I not only met Michael that day, but also Paul McCartney, his wife Linda, George Martin, Jeff Emmerich, the engineer that recorded the Beatles.
You're just a small Beatles fan.
Just a very, very, very minor one because, like everyone,
you had heard of them.
yes, and everyone who's probably of my age who grew up in that era, the Beatles changed the world.
Right.
And they changed the landscape of entertainment and music and youth and culture, society, everything. Everything was altered after that, and to be able to be with those people was, that's they're living legends. Not that Michael isn't. Michael was a living legend too. So it's just that to be with all of those people was pretty darn exciting.
And you've told me about that session, and Steve Piccaro's told me about that. But wasn't there a film crew there?
Somebody told me there was a film crew. I think it was Paul McCartney's. I want to say it was Paul McCartney had some film people, and if they were there, they came in and they shot a little bit of footage and then they disappeared. They didn't hang for the whole thing.
Right.
They were documenting the event, but they also, I think, were cognizant enough to know that to make themselves scarce when the actual recording of music began.
Okay. So I'm doing kind of a series of I guess interviews is the best word, with my friends, which is really cool, to talk about one song, each person talking about a different song. And I'd like you to tell me about one song that you were involved in, or a Michael song that had some impact or unique story to it.
Okay. Well, this is always a difficult question because all the songs mean so much to me, and to choose a favorite is very difficult. But the one that I think had a very large effect on me was probably "Beat It." That's one that I got to play a considerable role in the production. So I feel very good about it. I feel that was one I made a contribution to that was substantial.
Probably a contribution that everybody knows.
But yeah, they gave me a lot of responsibility, let's say.
So before we jump into that song, people that I always have to remember that you and I and a very blessed handful of people have been in a studio with Michael Jackson. But what's it like? I mean, it's a rhetorical question for me, but I just want people to hear it from you. When he shows up, is it an entourage and a limo and people holding champagne and butlers, or what's a studio day like when Michael is there?
Well, when we were doing Thriller, at the point at which Michael was in his career, when Michael would show up, instead of a limo and an entourage, it was more like there was a shadow that would kind of flash by you, and if you weren't really quick, you might miss it. He would usually be driven to the studio, and he'd come in and he would literally sneak in the back door of the studio building. Then he would sneak in the back door of the studio in which we were working. And I know that of Michael's being shy and being introverted and being quiet. And at the beginning of Thriller, that was kind of, I almost want to say overpowering. He was so quiet. He was so reserved.
Really?
Yes. When it came to the fact where there were people milling about and doing things, Michael was more than happy to not be the center of attention,
Right.
unless he was making a point.
Right.
Unless there was something that he was giving a direction about the music, or there was some musical thing that was a topic and was being discussed. At which point he was solid, he was on the money, he was confident, he knew exactly what he wanted. It's just that he didn't have a lot of ease and social grace when he was around people that he didn't know yet.
Right.
And once he warmed up to you, of course, that would change. But he was quiet and reserved. And when it was time for something to happen, regardless of what it was, whether it was Michael discussing the music or talking about the writing or actually performing, I mean, it was just gangbusters when it came out, because there wasn't any hesitation. There was a very clear definition of someone who knew exactly what they were looking for, and they knew exactly what they wanted to accomplish, and they knew how to do it. It wasn't like, this was someone who didn't know the ropes or wasn't familiar with studio life and how to get the most out of working in the studio.
I love the way you phrase that, because I might steal that, about no hesitation. I mean, that's a great description of him going behind a microphone, which is incredibly intimidating, and just saying, "I'm here to work," and that's really cool.
Well, it's also intimidating when I can only imagine now, being in Michael's position, when you're in the room and you're with a group of a dozen people and they're all music professionals, and it's your song and you want it done your way. So you have to explain to everybody the intricacies or the details for how you want all the musical parts executed. And that was the thing that from the beginning, Michael knew exactly what it was. He knew exactly what he wanted to hear from basically all the musicians. When he was working with Paul as well, he would say to Paul, "No, this is the part where you sing this line, and you should be here or there." They worked amazingly together, collaboratively when they were creatively coming up with parts, when something didn't already exist. But when Michael knew, no, this is the way the song should be at that point, whether it was a musician, Paul, or anyone else in the room, Quincy, Michael, Rod Temperton, he would explain it in detail, and you would really get what it was that he wanted, because he had such a clear vision.
Yep.
It wasn't like you were struggling to understand something, because if you didn't, all you had to do was ask Michael, and his vision was so specific that you would share it with him, and you'd get the thing that he was trying to reach.
Right. Love it. All right, let's jump into the song "Beat It."
Okay.
So tell me how it came about and your contribution to it.
Well, a lot of the songs on Thriller, especially the ones that Michael wrote, he was writing these leading up to when we started working at Westlake. So there were a few songs that he came in that were already completed demos. He had been working at his home studio, the Havenhurst studio, with Brent Averill. And the group of songs that we started with, working on a project, if you haven't worked in a studio like this, it's kind of like you're testing the water. You want to get as much good material, as many good songs together, and then you want to get them recorded, because until you actually hear things back, you have a tough time evaluating. Someone can sing you a line or a melody, but until you hear it, all those parts sitting inside the production, and you hear that music coming out of you at the speaker, you really don't know what you're going to get. So we had been working on a whole group of songs of Michael's and some of Rod's, and Quincy was looking for more songs. And there was the discussion between Michael and Quincy and Rod about covering a lot of bases. Quincy's a great person for knowing how to combine elements to get a result, a desired result. Right. And Quincy was looking for a broad spectrum of songs, melodically, emotionally, stylistically. And we were maybe about halfway through, and he was encouraging Michael, come on up with some more stuff. We need more good songs. So I guess Quincy had gone to the Havenhurst studio because Michael said he had a couple new songs, and Quincy heard the songs and he really liked Beat It. And that got brought into Westlake. So we had the demo there to examine. And one of the things that Quincy was always particular about doing was if he heard a demo and he heard the way that instrumentation and the arrangement and the production values were working, and he liked it, then that's exactly what he wanted the final recording to represent. Very often, someone has an idea, and then in the process of recording, that idea that you loved so much gets changed, either due to the technology or the musicians, the personnel. But that was something that Quincy was always really very, very keen on, making sure that the feeling of the recording of the song that went on the record had all of that emotional quality, all of that energy that the demo had, because that's the thing that you fell in love with at the beginning.
Right.
So that's that same thing that you want when you hear the record.
Mm-hmm.
And in a recording studio, I can only tell you that is one of the most difficult things to achieve, because when you're recording a demo and your mind is just out there, you're just experiencing the moment, you're feeling the emotion. You're not thinking about perfection, and you're not thinking about recording technique. So, you're sloppy and you're loose and you're letting all the emotion hang out. And then you go into the studio where it's very sterile and you've got all the really expensive gear, and now the pressure is on. Sometimes you just can't get back into that same frame of mind. Right. And it's that frame of mind that allowed you to be in that creative place when you were giving the performance that you did on your demo. So we started recreating Michael's demo, and very authentically, very sincerely recreating all the parts. David Williams came in to recreate the guitar parts that he had done. All the same techniques, all the same instruments. If it was possible to have the exact same drum machine, the exact same synthesizer, not just the same model or brand, but the exact same one, because it might have some different quality, or right. The program that they used may have been modified in that. So there was a lot of that attention to detail.
Was this with Michael's Lindrum, his personal? Or was this before the red one?
This was before the red one. This was before that personal one that he always used.
Okay.
But they were, everybody's a real stickler for listening to the demo and then recreating every nuance,
right?
For what people who buy the record are going to be able to experience.
So was there a guitar? I'm sorry, was there a guitar solo in the demo?
No, there wasn't, because when Michael did the demoing at the Havenhurst studio, his studio was only a 16-track. Now, at Westlake, we had a 24-track, right. And as you know very well, we were locking two 24-track tapes together. So when Michael only had 16 tracks and he had to create the entire representation for what all of the parts on the song were supposed to be, it was a very limiting thing. He had to pick and choose the most important aspects of melody, rhythm, arrangement, and production. And the framework was all there, but it was like the frills and the the icing on the cake wasn't quite as finished and polished.
Okay.
Which gave Quincy a lot of room to finesse all of the minor details.
Right.
And as the work went along on it, it was sounding really good. Lots of energy. One of the things that Quincy had discussed with Bruce and Rod and in the studio as we were working, and something that he told Michael as well was, there was a song at that time that was a big hit. It was called My Sharona by a band called The Knack.
Yep.
And it just had this kind of energy, this feeling. It was a very simple song in terms of the construction of it. But it had this wonderful bounce to its energy and this uplifting sound. And Quincy said, it'd be great to have a song that had that type of, came from that kind of place, had that kind of energy. And that's what Quincy saw in the possibility of Beat It, although Beat It was a lot more edgy. It was a little more rock. It just had a more powerful presentation. But it had that same kind of, real rock and roll is actually very simple,
right,
as a genre. It got very complex with corporate rock in the 80s and the 90s. But when you strip it down, rock and roll is very basic. So it was trying to keep that basic simplicity of the energy with all of the ideas and all of the production details. So as we worked along on it, there was no guitar solo on the demo. And one day Quincy said, yeah, we got to figure out who's going to put a solo on this thing, because this has got to be a rock anthem type of single.
Right.
So there were a whole lot of names that were thrown around in the studio, and no one was decided on, and none of us in the control room could come up with a solid suggestion. And the next day Quincy came back and he said, well, I've got it. I've got the guy for the solo. It's Eddie Van Halen. And then of course everyone in the room goes, oh, well, of course.
Of course.
He was at the peak of his rock and roll craziness, and that band was just stomping up the charts with all the records they had.
Right.
Stylistically, no one had quite managed to capture what Eddie was able to deliver with his style on playing guitar. So he did have a definitely unique quality. Quincy told the story that he thought someone had mentioned, or he thought the name Eddie Van Halen. So he got Eddie's telephone number and called him up to ask him if he could, come in to play a little bit on Michael's record and do a solo. And of course, Quincy called Eddie. Eddie did not expect to get a call from Quincy, and he thought it was somebody goofing on him. So of course, right. What does Eddie do except hangs up the phone on him? Like, yeah, right, you're Quincy Jones. So Quincy called back a second time, and Eddie hung up on him again. So on the third attempt, the telephone rang, and before anything could happen, as soon as the phone was answered, Quincy immediately went into, please, Eddie, please don't hang up again. This is really Quincy Jones. I'm calling you. Please just listen to me for just a moment. I'd like to talk to you a little bit. We're doing a record at Westlake Studios. It's Michael Jackson's new record, and we really would love you to come in and play on a song. We've got a great track that you would, your guitar would just lend so much personality to. And Eddie is not a studio musician. He's not a session guy. He doesn't come in, he doesn't play on people's records. He has his own band. So this was a big stretch for him, but Quincy convinced him. He agreed. And so when Quincy said it's Eddie Van Halen, And he turned to Bruce and gave Bruce a funny laugh and said, gee, we can have him come in and he can record the solo in the studio across the hall. And Bruce agreed that would be a good idea because we got a lot of work to do in here, in this room. And of course, reading between the lines, I knew that Quincy and Bruce were just old R&B guys.
Right.
And they would probably rather have someone else be in charge of that. And at which point, Quincy says to Bruce, do you think this is something Matt can do across the hall? And of course, I managed to not jump out of my skin at that moment.
That's awesome.
Be totally calm and cool and said, no problem, love to do it. Eddie Van Halen to me is just one of those guitar gods that the chance to work with him was something I dreamed of.
Sure.
He was in the back of my mind when I moved to California. Like, wow, going to California, working in a studio, going to do rock and roll music. This was like the moment for me. So I got the gig, and in 2 days, Eddie's equipment showed up at the studio. Don Landy was invited to be at the studio, and they wanted to really ensure that what was on the record was authentically Eddie's sound, his signature personality.
Sure.
Because he did get a really unique character of sound. So let me be a geek for a second. What was his rig like? His rig was an old Marshall half stack. Okay. Because the older Marshall amplifier heads didn't have an overdrive knob that you could artificially crank in distortion. On the very early Marshalls, you actually did have to crank them very, very loud. You had to run them on 10. And that was the thing about the amplifiers that generated that tone, that tonal characteristic that Marshall amps were known for, was the overdrive, the overload in the amplifiers. And if you got one of the really early amplifiers, it was done, that tone was generated slightly different than the more consumer-friendly ones that they designed and manufactured later.
Right.
So he had a half stack. It was basically a very simple setup. He had his guitar through a Guild Echoplex, I believe it was, and into the Marshall, Shure SM57. It was the most simplest, basic recording setup you could imagine, because after all, this was rock and roll. And Eddie ran a guitar cable into the control room so that he could stand in the control room and hear the playback through the monitors when he did his guitar part, when he performed. And it was Eddie, Don Landy, myself, and Dave Concourse was the engineer who assisted on that date. It was just such a simple, straightforward thing. We walked in, Eddie went out to the amp, he got his sound, got warmed up. Don Landy made sure the 57 was in the correct position to capture the correct tone. And
don't they put like was it ring 3 or whatever it is? The third ring in on the driver?
The third ring in on the driver.
Yeah, that's the way I learned. You've got the speaker, and the speaker has the ribs. We used to call them the rings. And I think that's how Bruce did it. You'd kind of put it right on the third ring. Maybe I'm crazy.
No, that was approximately it. I don't know if Don Landy was aligning it specifically, to some component of the ring on the cone.
Right.
He may have. I just kind of noticed the approximation.
Okay.
It was about a foot away from the cabinet.
Okay.
And it was just like if someone casually went up and just set the mic in front. It wasn't a long,
It was not
labored thing to get it.
okay. There were no micrometers involved.
No.
Okay. Okay. So what was Eddie like? Was he cool?
Eddie was very cool. I mean, Eddie was like totally focused. You could tell how businesslike he was, because anyone who comes into a studio and is going to have to give a performance, usually you can sense a certain nervous tension that they have, because that would be what any performer would feel going into a situation where, you know, now they've got to do their thing. So not a lot of joking around in conversation. It was really down to business.
Okay.
And I had created a special tape, multi-track tape, 24-track tape, for him to put his solo on, because by this time, as I had mentioned, in you know this well, when you work on 24-track tapes and you work on master reels and reels that you then build off of that, you end up with a lot of reels of tape.
Right.
And the reason for doing that is that you can put a cue mix together that represents what the track is doing, the rhythm section is, and then you can have a lot of open empty tracks to record on, so that if you need many takes to test out ideas or performances, you can have 10 or 12 tracks to play with. So I had built a tape especially for this purpose, so that Eddie could have as many tracks. I think I had 10 or 12 tracks open, so that if he wanted to, you know, do a dozen takes, he was free to.
Sure.
And I know that while that was not his style of working, doing his rock and roll records, which were much more basic and faster and you know, just cut to the chase, forget with all the technological bells and whistles. You know, I had to blend the technology that we were using on Thriller, which was at that time at a pretty high level, along with let's get Eddie comfortable so he can just do his basic rock and roll feel, and he can just wail on his guitar.
Sure.
So we set it up. And Don Landy dialed in the EQ and made sure it was sounding authentic to Eddie's sound. I ran the tape machine, and basically we did, I think, 4, maybe 5 passes. And they were all pretty close. Ed knew exactly what he wanted to go for in the solo, so there were minor differences between the takes. And it was recorded, and then all the guys are kind of looking around sheepishly, and they're going, well, are the Quincy going to come in? You know, the guy's going to come in and check out what we're doing. And I said, well, what we'll do first is let's complete our process, and let's comp this down. Let's take the best portions of what you've done on those takes, and let's put them together into a final solo.
Right.
Comping, or making a composite, is when you take several takes and you choose all the best things and you put them into one complete take, because that's the way that's the way it's going to play on the record. That's the way it's going to play in the final mix, and you have to pare things down to the simplest part of the process, to not make it more complicated in the studio doing the work. So we put it together. It was basically the first half of one take and the second half of another, with the exception of Eddie wanted this sound, and the sound was
yeah.
It was the sound of him. That was actually him knocking on his guitar body.
Okay.
So when you hear that on the song, that's just him making the noise, and then he goes right into the solo. So when it's all wrapped up and everybody's happy that we got a great solo, we call in Quincy and Bruce, and those guys come in. I think Rod Temperton was there that day. They come into the room, and we play it. And I know Bruce and Quincy had been doing some really hard work because they had some really long faces on that day. They were in really serious work mode. And they came in and they were like, okay, let's hear what you got. And we hit play, and it went into that solo. And talk about a lot of giant smiles happening in the room. Quincy was just about jumping with joy. He was like just so happy. And so, I mean, you can't listen to that solo and not feel the energy,
right?
And not feel, that tremendous feeling of power and energy. And it has that emotional quality of not just excitement, but just a positive, good feeling. You get a good feeling from that solo.
Yeah,
it's not mournful or dreary whatsoever.
No, it's amazing.
In 20 minutes time, basically, it was all wrapped up and done. The solo was completed. Eddie was packing up his guitar.
Really? I mean, you're being serious. Start to finish.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the fastest, easiest sessions I've ever done.
Wow.
They came in knowing exactly what they wanted to do. Total professionalism. Eddie ripped those solos off one after another. And he was so focused and so in tune with what it was he was going to play. It was just a matter of, how he was doing his inflections. It wasn't like he was totally doing totally different melodic approaches. They were all in the pocket. He was just going for his best execution.
Now, where was Michael?
Michael was not there that day. Michael was at home working on another one of his songs.
So was Eddie disappointed, or did he say anything? Or
he didn't say anything.
Okay.
Michael and Eddie did get together later.
Right.
But for that session, it wasn't there. That was how a lot of the Thriller album went, because Michael was working on the songs that he was writing at the Havenhurst studio. At Havenhurst, while the recording of the album was going on at Westlake with Bruce and Quincy, myself and Rob.
Okay, that's interesting.
Well, it was because, there was this push. Everybody wanted the best material possible. Michael absolutely was in that frame of mind. So when he wasn't involved with other matters of business, he was at home. He was working on writing songs. If he could come up with another brilliant song, then that was definitely going to go on the record. If it had that level of energy and that quality that a hit song should have.
Right. And didn't, I mean, I've heard these stories many times, but didn't Thriller, the whole project basically took 7 or 8 weeks over the course of that summer?
Well, we were in the studio the week of April 14th to record
The Girl Is Mine.
The Girl Is Mine with Paul McCartney. That was the only time that Paul McCartney had time available to be in Los Angeles and do a studio date. So that was really done apart from the rest of the recording of the album.
Right.
We actually started in July for the real serious effort of doing the album. So then there was a couple weeks taken off for some reason, I don't know. So it was like July, August, September. It was a what did you say, 7 or 8 weeks?
Yeah, 8, 9 weeks, something like that. I mean, I wasn't there.
I would say it was closer to,
You got a phone call. It's all right.
yeah,
Do you have to grab it?
no, I don't answer that phone.
Okay. Okay. Would you believe I still have your home number memorized? I won't say it, but your home number is still seared in my brain for real.
There are several numbers like that. The Westlake studio where we did Thriller,
Yep.
2155.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
That number's still there too.
All right. So we got to put a button on this or,
Okay.
or whatever it is. So so that was great. I don't know. I mean, you met Michael approximately what year was it?
That was 1982.
That was 82. And when was the last time you saw Michael?
It was sometime at the end, before they did the second half of the Blood on the Dance Floor tour.
Okay.
Because we were back in the studio and we all were working together. We went to Montreux, Switzerland, and then we were the first half of it was actually the history tour.
Right.
What happened was they put the history tour together. They took it out on the road. They then took a hiatus in the middle of the tour. They came back in. We worked on putting the songs together for the Blood on the Dance Floor album. And then Michael went back to complete the history tour, which we then kind of called the Blood on the Dance Floor tour. And that was really the last time we worked together. I want to say it was the last time I saw him in person. We spoke by phone quite a bit.
Okay.
And then he went back out on tour, and then he started doing a lot of the pre-production and the songwriting work for his next album, for Invincible.
Okay.
But I wasn't involved on Invincible, so I didn't see him then.
Okay. So, we do, I guess you'd say millions of MJ fans commemorate his passing on June 25th. I don't dwell on that very much. I celebrate his life and his creativity and his friendship and genius. Looking back on it, you can't say any highlights because that's silly, but I don't know. What's your takeaway? What's a memorable trait of Michael's?
Professionalism.
Mm.
You mentioned the phrase takeaway. So many people, Michael's music means so much to.
Yeah.
I understand that. I get that because Michael is Michael. Nobody like him and nobody close. His music was incredible by any standard. But the entire experience for me was, yes, we created a tremendous amount of great music. But for me, the true takeaway was all the lessons that I learned. Working with Michael and all of the other great talented people associated with Michael that we got to share in the studio. And it's kind of like, I got to kind of, I don't want to say grow up because, I was already an adult when I started with Michael. I guess I'd have to say the maturing process of my life changed working with Michael, Quincy Bruce, Rod, all of those guys, and then Bill Bottrell, Chris Carell, John Barnes, all of the other people, all the other years. You mentioned Steve Porcaro. I was able, by observing what was going on, to really grasp so many lessons about not just the work, not just the attitude, not just the what does it take you personally in terms of effort, in focus and creativity to do this. There were all of those things, but there also were those other life lessons about, about family and how you hold yourself, how you conduct yourself, how to be self-assured, how to have that confidence. And for someone who is a creative individual, the relationship that you have with creativity is it's very deep, it's very complicated, it's very often totally consuming of your mind, of your body, of your life. And all of those things combined just left me with the feeling, the overwhelming presence that I have of I sometimes feel like I'm, the luckiest guy in the world.
Mm-hmm.
That I got to not only work with Michael and know him and help facilitate his success that he did achieve. I was a small part. I was part of the team. I was always in there working, always trying to do my best, but following Michael's lead, because it's almost like, if you figure at one time I explained it like being in the studio, that's like the engine. That's like the engine of everything. And the engine has a lot of moving parts, and all those moving parts have to work together flawlessly. You can draw the metaphors of, what part of the engine everybody is assuming.
Right.
But to me, one of the things that was always in the engine were always the fumes. The fumes of the gasoline, because there's something about the mixture of gasoline and oxygen that it has this tremendous potential. But Michael was the spark.
I love it.
And if because growing up, I love cars. It's just that when you see that animated picture of the cutaway of here's the piston moving inside the motor, and here's the parts moving, and there's the fumes, and that you see that little spark go off, and there's that explosion, in the combustion chamber of the engine. To me, that was what Michael was. Michael was the spark that was igniting those fumes and that energy that was derived from that. Because to be in a studio with professionals, you're one, you've experienced, you've been there, to see the brain trust at work, right, to see the dynamic of the collaborative effort just taking shape and flowing, and the give and take. Michael had a phrase that something to the effect, you may know it better than I. The best way to learn is to observe the masters.
Right.
Did I phrase that?
Yeah, I know what I can't nail it either, but learn from the masters, and try to do better.
Well, his phrase was study the masters and become greater.
Right. Thank you.
Because that's what Michael did. Michael studied all of the masters of not just the creative arts, but of everything. Yeah. Science, technology, business, industry. Michael did that. That's what his life was about. And I feel that I was able to benefit from that because I was not only able to learn those things, but I was able to experience them. And I can't imagine experiencing those things in a more ideal situation to learn and understand what the appropriate effort and focus and energy can do when you work together and you bring that together, the fruitions of that thing that you take out of the studio at the end of the process. Oh my gosh. You've been in the studio with Michael, so you know what walks out the door at the end of the process is staggering. It is amazing.
We were fortunate to be at the right place at the right time, and work with somebody amazing.
That's right, and to learn those lessons and to share that, not just the music and not just the success, but the humanity.
Yeah, love it.
And this is a time. This is a time when humanity is doing crazy things. So we as humanity, we have to stick together. We got to do our best.
So Matt won't say this, but I will. Michael loved Matt for real. Michael loved you, and you know that. Yes. I've said this. I don't want to tell the order that I'm recording these, but I was talking to one of the other guys a couple nights ago, and it's kind of funny. You know, you go through Michael's, I don't know, I hate to say inner circle, but those of us that were the studio rats, the studio guys, for, you know, almost without hesitation, we're all still friends. And, you know, we're older, and I've packed on way more pounds than I probably should have, and I got to deal with that. But even as life goes on, I've known you for 3 decades, I think, and we're still friends. I would do anything for you. You would do anything for me. So I kind of circle back to this whole Michael surrounded himself with good people. And it's always kind of funny to say that about yourself, but I look at the guys that he worked with and stayed with, and I have to give them a nod because they're good people and we're still friends. So, yes. All right, my friend, this was awesome. Go ahead. One final thought.
In connection with that, one of those things that I think Michael exhibited, and coincidentally, the people who ended up being in that inner circle also exhibited, and I say this, you know, this is one of those crazy things to have to say, but, you know, humility. We're all humble because we have perspective.
Right.
Everybody, you know, in that work situation had a serious perspective about the world, where you are, what you do. You know, it was like Michael didn't take himself seriously. He took his music incredibly seriously, but there was just always this just amazing, tremendous attitude and feeling that I explain to people when people ask the question, did you have any idea when you were making Thriller the success that it would have? And I say, oh, of course not. You never know.
How can you?
No, but in retrospect, I have never had a studio experience that compared with Thriller in terms of the heart and the soul and the focus and the teamwork and the selflessness that everyone displayed. And that was a huge reflection on Michael, because, you know, every time Michael would come into the studio, he'd be just like happy to see everybody and the spirit and the energy, and would just set the tone. Right. And, you know, we are all so fortunate to have experienced it.
Perfect. All right, my friend. I'm coming to LA, come hell or high water. I'm going to be there in 2021. I hope and beg that you'll come hang out with us. I think we're going to try and call it like the reunion year or something, because we lost a year, so we got to make up some time next year. But please come hang out with us when we're there. I know people would love to see you in person again, and it's good seeing you.
It's great being part of this. Great chatting whenever we get the chance to talk. And yeah, if the invitation's open, I'll come hang out with you.
Squeeze us into your schedule.
It's as much fun for me to go to these things, and I'm not trying to blow smoke here, but it's as much fun for me to attend your event as I think it is for a lot of the fans, because I get to hear everybody else's stories, and I'm going like, oh wow, that's so cool. I never heard that one before.
Well, I miss it. I'm not going to lie. I'm going through withdrawal because I should be in LA right now. I should have been in Moscow 5 weeks ago, but here we are. So yeah. we're going to get through this and pick it up as soon as we can. And I can't wait to see you again.
Well, I feel the same, and there's a lot of good things coming.
Awesome. All right, my friend, stay safe. My best to your family, and we'll talk soon.